Hi, I'm Bob Osterhout. I wanted to do a follow-up video on the video on depression that hopefully you've already seen, but if not, you can go back to it. It's on my site. And I made that video 24 years ago, and actually, there's nothing I would change in it if there's nothing different, nothing in there that I don't still believe is applicable or helpful in depression. But I have learned a few things in that time, and I wanted to share some of that. And one is just kind of an overall summary that my understanding of, first of all mental health disorders, but depression we'll talk about, is that it serves a function. I believe that everything in life serves a function. And so the function of depression, in my mind, is to get our attention that there's something wrong with our energy. Okay, something's going on with our energy. Either we are not producing enough energy or we're using too much, one of those things. And so we can address depression by looking at those two questions. Okay, so if we're not, most of the time when people are actually all of the time, I've never seen one who's not, who's someone who's not depressed, the breathing is very shallow. It's up in the chest and it's slow and you're just simply not getting enough oxygen. So, okay, let's get into balance, physical, mental, and emotional balance. And there are other videos on each of those, so you can go into detail on how to do that. But that probably resolved, I would guess, 60% of the people I saw, maybe even 65, 70% of the people who are depressed, simply by restoring physical, mental, and especially mental balance or emotional balance, because that is that's where emotions get stuck with tension in the body, because emotions are physical events. And so when we tense our body, we're using up energy, but it also blocks the emotion. And so it's a continuing, ongoing drain. It's like just putting a drain on your gas tank, okay? And it's just going to run out, and you can keep pouring it in, but it's just running out, and you got to shut off that drain, and allow your emotions to open up. So, and that's part of it. And there's a video on understanding emotion that addresses that. So looking at how we use energy and how we waste energy. So whenever we're overtired or pushing ourselves, we tend to produce more energy than we use because our body just wants to rest. So we have to bypass that signal. And so we're always creating tension when we do that, and that builds up and creates a pattern of tension. And it can catch us by surprise. We're charging ahead and moving and getting stuff done, and then all of a sudden, okay, and it's like the drain has got to the bottom of the tank, and you need to replenish. So it's gets us to stop and think and assess. If you're doing something that's not meaningful or purposeful and doesn't seem to have much value, and you're just doing it again and again and again and again, you have to push yourself to do that. Okay, and you tense when you do that. So it's the same thing. You're creating that extra, wasting that energy, building tension. It's an ongoing process, and that's where getting the balance in the autonomic nervous system with the natural rhythm breathing, as described in the other videos, is really helpful. So I want to introduce Merritt. She has some questions. She's watched the video and has some questions she wanted to ask me. So Merritt, what's on your mind?
Yeah, well, the first question that kind of comes up for me while you're speaking, Bob, is about energy. And um, I know that some people might have a reaction when they hear that word. Like, what do you mean energy? So I understand what you mean, but I'm wondering if you can say more from your
Yeah,
perspective what you see about that word, energy. Yeah.
energy is. I mean, we're always producing and using energy. So are we need to eat. We need input. Okay, we need air. We need oxygen, and we need fuel. We need food. Okay, and that produces the energy for movement. So any movement or action, our brain is constantly using energy. Even when we're sleeping, okay, we need some energy. Okay, the energy needs go way down at that time, and that gives us a rest and a chance to replenish. But there's always energy moving in our body. All the cells are working and reproducing, and the blood is circulating and giving oxygen to all of those cells and distributing the energy. So it's just it's not esoteric kind of, woo-woo kind of thing. It's just something, I got a lot of energy today. Wow, okay. I know I don't have much energy. It's just our ability to move, our ability to do is based in how much energy we have to some extent, to a great extent.
Yeah, and to be maybe more forgiving with ourselves when we don't have a lot of energy, or we perceive that we don't have a lot of energy when we should, because maybe, or the other way around, like, or I guess maybe what I hear is that the energy isn't being used towards purposeful or meaningful work. That can be a cause of depression or
If it's long
needing
term,
to.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah. I mean, I do the dishes every night. It's purposeful, so meaningful. I like clean dishes. And so, yeah, I can enjoy that. But if I saw it as a drudgery and if I'm too tired, if I had a late night meeting or something like that, I'll leave them in the sink because I know I'm pushing myself and creating tension to get that done. So it's okay. I'm just going
mm,
to, and we'll be okay. Um,
yeah.
in terms of, repeat the beginning of your question. I was responding to the end and help me with the beginning again.
Yeah. Like what would you say energy is? What is energy?
Energy,
And
to sum it
yeah.
up, would be provides the ability for action, for movement, essentially. Um, uh, it's part of life. Okay, it's what we use
Mm,
to be alive. Um, you mentioned about doing work that doesn't have meaning or purpose. Um, and that's a long-term issue in most cases. It's like if you have a job that is just you don't enjoy it and the people aren't friendly, and so you have to push yourself to get it done.
mm,
Okay? It's not like I'm
mm,
looking forward to go to work. I want to get this done. This is good. It's like, oh, I gotta go to work. Okay, so you're creating tension to push yourself. Okay, so the function of depression and the function of when our energy is low is get our attention. Okay, what's needed?
mm,
What's needed? Do I need rest? Do I need to breathe? Do I need to look at my diet? Do I need sleep? Do I need something meaningful? Do I need to move? Okay, because just being stagnant, okay,
mm.
our body kind of just settles into a low energy mode, and we're not producing enough to do anything meaningful at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the other thing, well, that kind of surprised me this time around listening was what you said about the breathing, that 60 to 70% of people that you've worked with can resolve their depression through breathing.
Yeah,
And I know that I read a book by James Nestor called Breath,
right.
maybe a few years ago, and that book definitely changed my breathing a lot and my noticing of my breathing. Um, to close my mouth, put my tongue behind my upper teeth, and there's kind of a way that the mouth rests, and then we're able to breathe through our nose more easily. He writes in that book, which allows us to get the right amount of air. It's like very little things. You don't need to be like a yogi or be,
Right.
although those kind of practices I've done as well, some diaphragmic breathing, breath of fire, some yogic breath that's more intense. But I think for someone who's just like looking at their everyday life, it's actually pretty simple. Would you say the same thing about the kind of
Actually,
things you do,
actually,
or?
no, that's something that I focused on at the very beginning of my career. And what was I was really focused on what made the breathing, what made a difference in the breathing. And I was looking at the movement of the diaphragm. That's what I learned made a difference in
Mm,
working with people with violence. When I was able to get them naturally to move their diaphragm, there was no more violence. And so, okay, what's going on here?
mm,
You figure it out. And when I started doing counseling, the same thing, people would come up with anxiety and panic attacks. And it's like, okay, when they got the practice the breathing, people were getting better, but some weren't. Okay, so what's going on? And I was teaching my
mm,
classes the same thing. Some would get it, some wouldn't. So I would breathe with them and see what it felt like to me and what was going on. And what I figured out over a
mm,
couple of years, working with a few hundred people, was the key, and I'm disappointed that he didn't get this into his book, but the key is actually the movement of the diaphragm along the right vagus nerve. The right vagus nerve is
Oh,
about
I see. Yeah.
it passes through an opening in the diaphragm and explained on the video on natural rhythmic breathing. But when you get that proper rhythm established, okay, it's 3 to 4 seconds down, 3 to 4 seconds up. When you have that rhythm established, usually within a minute, I see evidence that the parasympathetic nervous system is activated. I
Interesting.
see people do that naturally for 3 breaths. I'll just say, "Are you feeling any different?" And they say, "Yeah, I feel a bit calm." And you can see it in their expression and so forth too. So
Mm,
people come in sometimes with a lot of tension in the diaphragm, and so it can take a while to get that loosened up. Practicing it 6 to 10 times a day, and that was an assignment that my students, as part of passing the course. Okay, they had to do that for 10 consecutive days, and then they just asked them to write what's different, and in many cases it was life changing. Simply, oh my God, I can see clearly. I'm not
hmm
blowing a gasket. Okay, I'm getting things done. One consistent response was, I have more energy at the end of the day, and I've got more accomplished. How can that be?
mm,
And it's simply that, okay, now you're getting to your natural system working again. Okay, and we have this habit of stress breathing. And there's all kinds of techniques that are connected with breathing, and most of them are related to relaxation or meditation or something, but they all
mm,
depend on the parasympathetic nervous system for their effectiveness. Okay, so go
mm.
directly to that, and that the key there is very clear to me is the natural rhythm of the diaphragm. So I call it natural rhythmic breathing.
Mm,
I don't call
mm.
it diaphragmatic breathing because I used to, but people use that term for all kinds of things, even holding the breath. And um, breath holding can be relaxing if your parasympathetic nervous
Hmm.
system is very active, but you want to get it active first. And what you really want to do is get it into default. So your natural way of breathing is getting that diaphragm moving all the time. And when people would come in and I would see them breathing naturally from the diaphragm in the proper rhythm, I pretty much knew that we were done. They might need some help with
Wow.
solving or something like that, but pretty much, start going through symptoms and, oh yeah, no, I'm feeling good now. Yeah, it's like, okay.
Yeah.
It's, I actually
Mm,
I had a student who had a 20-year history of panic attacks. And she took my course and she signed up in May for the fall course when registration opened, and she got the book right away and read the parts on breathing and started practicing it. And she sent me an email the first day of class in late August. And her doctors had told her she had all kinds of different treatments and therapies and medications. And her doctor finally just said, get used to it. Okay, this is just part of your makeup,
uh,
and you're just going to have to learn to adapt.
mm,
Okay, nothing is
mm.
working. She hadn't had a panic attack in over a month, and she didn't have another one throughout the course. Okay, simply got the parasympathetic nervous system back into default.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's a powerful
Amazing.
thing.
Yeah. Wow. Um, yeah, I think it's great news. I think it's great you're sharing this with people because it's not something that it's not a medication but it seems very simple. That's what I like
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, yeah, and that was I worked at a federally qualified health center, so I got actually there at one point they wouldn't let me take referrals from outside because I was too busy, and so all the referrals came from the doctors, and my favorite were people who couldn't take the medication for some reason or another, because we could
Mm,
resolve
mm,
things much quicker that way, and there wasn't the
mm.
dependence. The doctors would wean them off, and they'd still be okay. Some of them would. Some doctors like the medication, and okay, we have to work with that. But yeah, let's get things in balance first, and then see where we
Hmm. So what do you say to the other, 40, 30, 40% of people that are still suffering, even if they start doing breathing and it's improving, but there's some other things going on?
Well, there's always improvement once they're in balance, and now we're looking at their what's I mean, we've already addressed by that point the sleep and the diet and the energy inputs. Okay, so once people are in balance in that point and they're producing some energy, then it's like, okay, what's going on in your life? Or there's two paths actually that first come to mind. One is, what's going on in your life. And so I remember there was a guy who had a very successful job, made a lot of money, and didn't really like it. Just felt unfulfilled, and just what he really loved was cooking and baking and restaurants, and he just started doing research on how to open a restaurant. And a restaurant came up for sale, and he bought the restaurant, and I didn't see him again after that, and I happened to stop in the restaurant a year later, and he was full of joy. Okay, he needed a career change. He was doing something that wasn't meaningful to him. Okay, the other path has to do with emotional balance. Okay, and that's where we're holding in emotions with tension. And so when someone is able to cry fully without inhibiting it with tension or holding their breath, that's an indication that they're moving toward and getting close to emotional balance. So when someone tries to cry, they go, okay, I'm holding my breath, I'm tensing all over the place. Okay, so I encourage them to, okay, put your feet flat, get your pelvis down in your chair, lean back a little bit, let your breathing open up, let your jaw relax, let your chest relax, let your forehead relax, let your shoulders down, whatever's tensing, I'll just point out, let that down, and then the tears flow. Okay, and sometimes there's deep sound that comes with it, and that sound releases the tension. And so, particularly in working with trauma, that's basically the essential process of recovery, is working through those emotions and allowing the experience of them, and then the constant reminder that I'll say to them, it's a normal emotion from a past event. So you may be really afraid, but you see, you don't tense with the fear. You just, okay, I'm safe here. Okay, it's a normal emotion from a past event. I mean, if it's really severe fear, I always, I'll check. Okay, is there anything outside? No, looks like we're okay. It's a normal emotion from the past event. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
how those.
the temptation among a lot of therapists is to, okay, well, where did that emotion come from? But in my experience, it's not a conceptual process. So explaining why I'm feeling this, what happened when I was 3 years old or 6 years old or infancy, whatever, okay, didn't really make a difference. And I found it counterproductive because when people are talking about emotion, you're stimulating more emotion. So you're filling up the cup while you're emptying it. So I simply tell them to just breathe and separate the thought from the emotion. Just give them a short phrase to repeat in rhythm with a breath, and just let the crying and the tears come. Occasionally, people need to get a perspective on something that happened that they're aware of, and we'll explore it until they start building tension. But as soon as the shoulders start to rise, okay, breathe and ground, and then tears start to come, let them come again. And that's yeah, those are the two main roads that I'm come to mind right now in terms of recovery from depression. It's like meaning and purpose, and then also on that road is relationships. Okay, being able to establish and maintain healthy relationships, which is part of the meaning and purpose of life, and then just restoring emotional balance.
One of the things that I think we talked about a bit in the Warm Data Lab that I didn't really hear mentioned in your previous video, but I'm curious about is, so you're working with the elements with people. I mean, there's tears, there's water, there's breathing, which is kind of air. And what about other elements or going into nature? Is that a part of your protocol at all with people? Because sometimes our depression is that this feeling of separation, not just from relationships, but from um, we didn't really grow up grounded and feeling a secure attachment. You can go into the reasoning of it, and I like that your method isn't so much, but it sounds like a secure attachment to mother and to earth sometimes is what we're all suffering from to some extent. So I guess I'm just bringing it up because one thing that was suggested to me by a therapist I worked with was to spend time with trees
Mhm.
and to spend time in nature as much as I could, even though, maybe taking walks in the park, um, or just sitting by water and watching. I live by the ocean right now, so I find a lot of people like I'll see them just sitting out and looking at the ocean, or doing things like that that bring us closer into contact with this okayness, the fundamental okayness that's always holding us. Do you work with that at all, or find that that's
Yeah,
helpful
I
to
mean,
people?
um, it's part of the work. I often suggest, people get out into nature, and it puts us in touch with our nature. And we live in a culture that has really diminished that.
Mm,
And also, um, if you spend enough time out there, there's a sense of belonging. Okay, this is where we live. Okay, and it's beautiful. Okay,
mm,
uh, it can be frightening at times when there's a big storm, but then there's peace afterwards, and it's a rhythm, and everything in nature is in balance. And people say, there's this phrase, I don't know if it's common these days, but they used to say it's a jungle out there. And it's like, well, the jungle actually is a place in balance. Where, I mean, there are predators and
right.
they eat, okay, but everything contributes in it. And there is a sense of peace and calm there that isn't in the corporate world, okay,
Mm,
the stock market, okay. It'd be nice if that was a jungle and there was an interconnected sense of unity and everyone contributing and nothing wasted. So
mm,
it's back to our roots and who we are. So that helps on that road of meaning and purpose. Is that when we have a sense of that connection with nature, we gain a deepening sense of who we are. And when we gain a deepening sense of who we are, we begin to get in touch with our potential and the desire to develop it. And then we realize that potential is needed in this world today. And so we have a purpose and we have a focus and we accomplish things that are helpful.
totally, totally. It's really beautiful. Um, well, I don't have a lot more questions because I just love the way that you wrap that up, and it really reminds me of Nora Bateson's book Combining, which has the Meadowverse in it, a passage on the Meadowverse, which is the meadow. You say the jungle, but she talks about a meadow, and that the meadow is always meadowing, and that the bee is always being the bee, and the grasshoppers being the grasshopper, and it's all doing its thing, and it's working together. It might not look like it's doing a lot, right? So, just to bring people back into that kind of
Uh,
symbiotic view of the world is
yeah,
really
thank
great.
you. Thank you for sharing that. My goal for people I see in therapy is for them to be fully and completely themselves.
Hmm.
And that means getting in touch with their nature and the larger nature that we're connected to. So, okay, thank you, Merritt. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Yeah.
Where do I do that? Oh, here we go.